What's up, Chiefs Kingdom? Noah Gray here, tight end for the Kansas City Chiefs. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Josh's channel and check out showmefootball.com for more.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video on my channel. My name is Josh Fan of showmefootball.com and arrowheadaddict.com. And today I had the pleasure to be joined by a very special guest, inspiration of mine. That is Ryan Tracy of RGR Football. He has his RGR Football YouTube channel, does Locked On Chiefs, Locked On NFL Draft, Rogue Analytics. Ryan, the question is, what are you not doing nowadays?
Sleep. I am officially a vampire, so don't want to be like me, man, because these bags, they're covered up pretty heavy right now.
Yeah, well, you've been working hard. We all know that. And the reason I wanted to bring you on this time of the year, I thought, because I always said we were going to link back up again one day after doing our first thing a few years ago. But yeah, I was wanting to bring you on. Then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to wait to the offseason because this is your thing. This is the draft. You live for this. You live for the draft. You have your draft guide. You have your athletic matrix. So I'm just going to give you your chance to plug that real quick. You kind of want to tell everyone about that and what goes into that?
For sure. If you guys want to check it out, it's at rogueapc.com. That's Rogue Analytics and Performance Consulting. That's what I do on the side for agents and teams every now and then. That kind of thing is just give my 2 cents because my algorithms are built around the stats and the performance in particular of the athletic tests. That's kind of where I got my start as strength conditioning coach like 20 plus years ago. So I still kind of home in on that, but man, there's a lot going on there. And if you guys want, use the code RGR23. You can get yourself a discount over there on the guides.
You heard him, guys. Make sure you go ahead and check that out. I will link that in the description where you can get that. But Ryan, I wanted to start with that actually. So you have your athletic matrix and, when I first started watching you, that was one of the first things that like you talked about when I started watching you years back is your athletic matrix. And I started getting into the draft because of you. Like I always followed the draft, but I wasn't really a guy that, would know every single player that's coming off the board. Sure. But you obviously have those resources available to fans for those wanting to get more into the draft. But sometimes I feel like they don't get the full understanding of like why this stuff matters, why athleticism matters. And so you have your athletic matrix that gives them a good idea of who's athletic in this draft and who's not. But could you explain actually to fans why athleticism is so important, especially in today's NFL, and why teams look for that in players?
Yeah, absolutely. Oftentimes these days, as the passing game becomes more prominent through the NFL, it is about, can you turn and run with somebody? That's the basics. And if you go back all the way to like Pee Wee football, the offense always has the advantage because they're playing forward at the skill positions. Now, obviously, offensive line, they're playing backwards, right? But it's how you take advantage of that. And so, especially for defensive backs who have to turn and run, linebackers that have to turn and run, safeties try to keep it in front of them. But for those guys, especially that start up near the line of scrimmage and have to turn, that's the big deal. And so it comes into not just straight speed. Everyone quotes 40 times, right? Even Raz.
Yeah.
RAS is a great
metric. We'll get to that. We'll get to that too,
okay.
The Raz score thing. But no, keep going.
It's great stuff, and you can compare apples to apples, and that's really great. But it doesn't give you a sense of functional athleticism on the field, and that's what my algorithms do. So back when I was starting, I was a GA at KU 1,000 years ago. Nobody watching will remember that's how long it was. But you have to the conversation's always turned to, it's not just straight line speed. It's like, how do you get there? Can a DB do a man turn and actually get his hips around in order to change direction? And so that's when I started cooking up how you combine all the different metrics to make it resemble and represent what's on the field. And so that's what it's evolved into. And so I tweaked for probably 10, 12 years as I continued outside of the NFL world, in the college world. And then later when I was just training athletes myself, I ran a personal training performance company for about 15 years. And I just piled it all in there. I took all the data that I had on draft classes going back to 1997. And that's how I built it up. And so this way, you can take a look at a guy's numbers and get an idea. When I tell you that this guy's got this ability and it's 10 times the guy that was drafted right next to him, now you can see visually like how you can compare them and what you're getting in your prospect that maybe the next team isn't.
Absolutely. And a most recent example that I was going to have you elaborate on, just to give Chiefs fans a perspective from their own team. We saw Orlando Brown walk this offseason, a tackle in which it was not very athletic coming out of the draft. And there were questions about whether he was going to be able to translate to the NFL because he didn't have some of that functional athleticism that you typically look for. And the Chiefs had really good athletes at their tackle spots back when they had Eric Fisher and Mitchell Schwartz. And then they were kind of willing to compromise with Orlando Brown because they kind of backed themselves into a corner where Orlando Brown was their only real option that made sense for a team trying to contend for a Super Bowl. But now we've seen they swapped him out for Jawaan Taylor. And I think a lot of fans are going, well, hold on, this guy's never played left tackle. Why are the Chiefs potentially planning for him to play left tackle? What's different about Jawaan Taylor than Orlando Brown?
Well, I'll tell you a couple of things. One, I think Mitch Schwartz would be very, very happy with you characterizing him as a good athlete because I think Mitch kind of set the table. Orlando's 27th in his class in the athletic.
At least relative to Orlando Brown. But
ding, ding, ding. That's exactly what it is. Mitch was higher in his class, but he wasn't like the top 10, right? He wasn't anything like Jawaan Taylor, who was 4th in his class in the athletic matrix. And so what it shows you is even that day at the pro day where Jawaan Taylor's best numbers came in from, that day he got worked out on the left-hand side by 2 scouts as well, because they identified at that point that he was able to move his body and just flip it to the mirror. And that resembles like your post leg, how you're driving off the line of scrimmage. It resembles how you control your hips because you have to open up a different direction. You got to test all that. And that was all there for Jawaan. You know, my initial write-up, even in his draft cycle, it was he has the ability to go over there. Will they let him do that? Will they coach him up to be a left tackle? And that was always the question. So I think the departure is they tried it with Orlando. Mitch was a step in the right direction because he had such great technique. He could overcome his lack of foot speed.
Yes.
Orlando couldn't. And so even though he has the length and he was still very good and 0 sacks in the postseason, right? He still is a guy, it's waiting to happen. It's going to put Patrick in danger of getting injured again. And I think the last 2 seasons of having Patrick Mahomes injured in the playoff run has got them a little gun shy. Like they thought they had it settled, and now they don't. So they're going back to basics, in my opinion. I think this draft will confirm it. If they go for an athlete at the tackle position, we understand they're going back to feet are more important than strike and arm length, although they do like long guys. So I think that's really the determining factor. And so Jawaan has it all. Would you like to leave him on the right-hand side? I certainly would. I think the team would too. But the nice thing is he gives you that versatility. So if you can't get a left tackle that you want, you can get a right tackle later on and still feel like you can put out a tandem that can protect Patrick Mahomes.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, regardless if he even works out at left tackle, I'm okay with it because, and I wrote about this for Arrowhead Addict before free agency. I was like, hey, why is nobody talking about Jawaan Taylor? I feel like he'd be a really good plan for the Chiefs because, okay, and I wasn't expecting the left tackle thing at first, but I was like, okay, I can see that. And then if he doesn't work out, you just play him at right tackle, and then fans, you know, they're uncomfortable because you're paying like $20 million a year for a right tackle. But at the same time, if you're going cheap at left tackle with someone you like in the draft, does it really matter at the end of the day? It's because you're still investing. I mean, yeah, you're investing a lot of money in a guy that's playing right tackle, but you have a guy that's versatile and you're going cheap at left tackle. So I feel like that offsets a little bit.
Well, in the end, you're paying a veteran and you're going to have a rookie or somebody young, right?
Yeah.
So that in terms of positional spending, I think that's what Brett Veach in the front office is looking at as a unit, as a 5-man starting line, we're still in the realm of where we want to be. And then when it comes time and say they draft, maybe they go get my guy Broderick Jones. Maybe they wait and they get Anton Harrison, right? Whoever it is, when it comes time for their either 5th year or a contract extension, then you got to make the decision. Then it's thanks, Jawaan. We appreciate your effort. Good luck at your next team. And then you're still maintaining, you're just flipping where you're paying it so that it stays even.
Exactly. Now moving on, I really wanted to ask you about RAS because you mentioned it earlier. That is a very popular metric that people are now starting to use when it comes to draft season and evaluating prospects. It's gotten a lot more popular rapidly over the last several years. And I wanted to ask you about this because now that athleticism is kind of being put into a number and people can easily see it online and on Twitter, like, oh, this guy's a good athlete and this guy isn't a good athlete. That's great. And it's a great resource for fans. But do you feel like a little bit that people have leaned too far on one side when it comes to factoring in athleticism? Or do you think this is a good thing? You know, how much should people be factoring in athleticism as opposed to college film or college production even?
I think it has to be part of every equation on every player ever taken, no matter what. And I think Math Bomb does a great job of presenting in a way that's easily digestible. And quite frankly, his graphics have gotten a lot better. It makes it really accessible to the average person. And the difference is that it is what it is. It's a relative athletic score. It's a percentile comparison against all the other guys that have come before him. And his data goes back as far as mine, if not a little bit farther, to be honest. And that's a great comparison. It gives you historical context. But at the end of the day, it's not just those scores, because you see they do top out. There's a lot of guys with, 10s, 9.9s, et cetera. And you have trouble differentiating in who translates and who doesn't. That's honestly, he's exactly where I was about 2 decades ago when I was like, okay, I've gotten as far as I can saying this 40 was this and this vert was this. Like, how does it compare? How do I put it all together? And that's kind of the next evolution. My metrics are a little bit more close to like Spark was, although it wasn't written for high school kids throwing med balls, but that's okay. That's a whole different thing. But it's a great comparison and it's easy. And I think it's great to shed the light on athleticism across the league.
Yeah. And I mean, I feel like too, that you've seen that teams do value that a lot. Not necessarily saying they go purely off RAS scores. I don't think GMs just like look at the RAS score and they move their board up and down because of that. It definitely factors in though. And I think he put out a tweet last year after the first round that for the 3rd year in a row, not a single player was taken in the first round with a RAS score lower than 5. So you're seeing better athletes go in the earlier rounds. Do you think that athleticism has become a more attractive trait to teams over the past few years? And do you think, I don't have data on this, I'm wondering if you do you think it's resulted in a higher bust rate in the first 3 rounds because teams are valuing athleticism a little too much?
I don't see the correlation with the bus, and I do watch that. But what I do see is that it is more and more part of the conversation. So you recognize why a guy's film doesn't look like X, Y, or Z. Why can't he get to that reach inside if you're coming down from the tackle? It's because he doesn't have that initial pop that you can either convert to vertical if you're going straight out, or that you have to go back to the broad jump to really kind of estimate, right? And so I think what it does is it opens the book up. It used to be, here's a score and here's a film. I still think the majority of your evaluation has to be based on the film. But what athleticism shows you in the way that both Raz does it, like Spark before us, and what I do as well, is it shows you where the gap is. And in certain cases where you have a guy that maybe has untapped athleticism, maybe he's got great scores and he just hasn't learned how to do it yet. Those are the ones that I think the GMs are learning more and more, that if I get a guy and I have a position coach that can get to him, or if I have a coordinator or staff in general that can get to him, I can wring all of that athleticism out of him and turn him into a player. That's the big difference.
Right, because you can take an athletic player and teach them what you want them to do. You can't take a guy and teach him something that he physically can't do. And I think a lot of fans, they have their favorite college team and then they have a favorite player on their college team that's like really productive at the college level. And then they're wondering, hey, why can't this guy crack it in the NFL? This guy was so good at I'm a Missouri fan. So Missouri, we drafted Nick Bolton a couple years ago, obviously. Mm-hmm. He's not a great athlete, but he obviously is very smart the way he plays. But then there's some areas where you see, hey, at Mizzou, I felt like he was a lot faster than he looked right there. And that's just because the NFL is a totally different game and there's better athletes on the field. Whereas in college, not everyone is an NFL athlete.
Yeah. I mean, so one of my personal life goals on my bucket list is to get to base camp at Everest, right? That's just one of my personal ones. It's a long trek. I'm not in the kind of shape to do that as I once was. So it's still a goal. Same thing for athletes. You can get to base camp, and that is the college base. You can have the athleticism to do that. That's a feat in and of itself. Getting up the mountain and to the summit is a different test. And so that's where it starts to really, really separate, and the elite athletes fall to the top. Everybody else can still be a very good athlete. It's just relative at that point. But I will say this, the difference for Nick Bolton in particular is that his brain, his instincts, and his processing make up for that first step quickness that maybe he doesn't have, particularly when he's trying to play backwards. I will give him credit too, because he's actually learned to get into his drops quicker, and he's better in coverage than I thought he was going to be in his career. He's already ahead of that. I think you can look at Isaiah McGuire. Sorry, too many McGuires in this draft. I think you can look at him in the same way this year. Like, he's got great power. He extends well. Can he turn that corner as much as you want? Probably not, but he can learn to do that. And what his testing shows is that's within the realm of possibility. Can you unlock it? That's the question.
Yeah, it's some really good stuff, and I appreciate the insight on my guys and McGuire. Kind of hoping for him to land in Kansas City in the mid rounds, but we'll see. We'll see. I wanted to ask you though, more Chiefs specific stuff. So, how would you actually rank the needs going into this year? I'd say wide receiver, and this is in no particular order: wide receiver, offensive tackle, defensive end are the three biggest needs. How would you rank those needs? And are those your top three, or are you thinking something else?
You're absolutely right. Those are the consensus top three. I think for the organization, it's not necessarily can you get tackle first or edge first. It's where are the guys that fit what we want. I think their requirements are narrower at edge than they are at tackle. So I feel like there's a little bit more room to play there. I personally feel tackle should be first because I think the drop off from the top three to everyone below is bigger than the top edges to the second group, the third group. I'm not one that subscribes to Tyree Wilson as being a consensus first rounder. I think it's Will Anderson and a bunch of dudes, and we'll see what happens, right? So I think I'm prioritizing tackle because it is Patrick Mahomes' team. You got to take care of business first, right? But then I want to come back, and I think that there's guys lower down that have, like you said, the athleticism, where they have something that they can hang their hat on. And Spags and Cullen have been really good lately about coming together and getting the most out of dudes that fit multiple fronts. And I think we're just going down that path farther. Mike Dana, George Karlaftis, inside, outside type maneuvers. I think they're just going to add a bunch of those guys and see who clicks where, and then they'll take advantage of the NASCAR package as much as they can.
Well, yeah, and real quick before I get to my next question, because I was going to ask something about wide receivers, but I think with Joe Cullen being in the room now, you're seeing more of a philosophical blend between what Steve Spagnuolo likes and what Joe Cullen likes. I know you're really a big Nolan Smith fan, so am I. Not sure how realistic he is for the Chiefs, but we've heard Joe Cullen talk about him a lot, and he was at that Georgia Pro Day coaching him up. So I think that's a guy that he'd really like to get his hands on. Nolan Smith isn't your typical Chiefs rusher because he's on the lighter side and he's bendier, whereas the Chiefs, they don't really go after the bendiest guys in the world. It's more of your stout guys on the edge, what Spags had in New York when he was doing his thing.
Yep.
So it'll be interesting to see because they've talked to a lot of, at least with the top 30 visits, they've talked to some guys a little bit on the lighter side and a little bit more athleticism than your typical Spags end.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's great because I think variety is the key here. And especially if you have guys like Omenihu that came in and now is another guy that can play inside or outside, you can really do it all. And if you stack them up correctly, you can get a guy like Nolan Smith that needs a little bit more. Like I said on my eval, he has to meet the tackle a yard and a half or 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage and he can win. But you got to scheme that up. So I like that. And I think Joe Cullen likes it too. And the other side note is, if you guys haven't heard this, is Joe Cullen is the guy that ran Jalen Carter until he dropped. He was running the workout that Carter couldn't finish. And I think that leans itself even more towards Nolan Smith because evidently he loved everything he saw from Smith. So there you go.
That's interesting because I didn't even know that. I didn't know he went that far with Jalen Carter or really any of the Georgia prospects, but that's cool to know. So I wanted to ask you about wide receivers real quick. That's the big topic of discussion among Chiefs fans right now. A lot of them are freaking out about wide receiver. I would be lying if I said I wasn't at least a little bit concerned because even though I feel like a lot of people – read into the sentiment that as long as Mahomes is upright, he can work with whatever. And I think that's true to an extent, but I think you do still have to give him some semblance of an NFL wide receiver core. And I feel like some Chiefs fans don't think they have that at the moment. Do you think they're far-fetched in thinking that? How do you feel about the wide receiver room? And what do you think of some of the recent smoke around the Chiefs drafting a wide receiver early?
I like the room as a whole. And I like the fact that they all seem to be gathering together. It is, I think, really the quintessential option of playing as a team, as a unit. I agree, though. This is a group of twos. I don't see a wide receiver one on the roster right now. And that's nothing to slight MVS or Kadarius Toney, both of whom I think have that capability. Sky Moore, I do think is more of a role guy. I don't know that he could ever become a one. That's okay. I don't have to. If they can find, and I do think they're going to take a couple of stabs at it in this draft. I expect multiple receivers to be drafted. The type is what's going to be interesting is do they want speed? Because they can get Jalen Hyatt at 31. I think that's really, really simple. Do they want size? We know that they've had in the big dude from TCU and Quentin Johnson. I don't know, like the outcome of that is probably what's going to determine whether he's going or not. We don't know that. Only Patrick does, really. So I expect like they got on the bat phone as soon as that workout was done and he said, yeah, go for it or don't. And then that leaves you all the other options. So I think there's still possibilities in there. I don't anticipate Nuke Hopkins getting traded to the Chiefs on draft night, but crazier things have happened. So you can't say no. But I agree. Like, you have to rely on Patrick as much as you can, but you also have to give him the tools that he needs to get the job done. Right now, I still think there's room to add to that room.
Yeah, because like I don't even think that the Chiefs – I think there's a pretty good chance you don't know if there's a number one wide receiver on the Chiefs heading into the season, but I'd feel a lot better if they were just at least adding someone with talent in this year's draft just to make you feel better about it. And then I think you can work with that a little bit because I think not only do the Chiefs not have a one, but it's a bunch of guys you're uncertain about because like Tony, everyone loves. We don't know if he can stay healthy. Right. MVS, he tends to disappear sometimes, and Sky Moore, the track record for receivers not doing too much in their rookie year and then exploding onto the scene in year two, it's not a very long list. And so people just have questions, I feel like. I don't know if you have anything to add on to that, but I was going to move on to the next question.
I think Richie James is probably the biggest thing that could be a plus here because you saw enough of him in New York that maybe you think he can evolve into that. And then he pushes everybody else forward too. I think the good thing about both Tracy and Sky is they're super young. And yes, you're right. Like jumping into like stardom in year two is not necessarily something that happens a lot. But if you make another good step forward, I thought Sky progressed through the season last year quite well. And so if he can continue that path, I can see him pushing. And we're still in that situation where having three receivers on the field that can always hurt you leaves Patrick more options. And that makes the job of the defensive coordinators that much harder. So I'm down with that. But I agree. One of these top three picks needs to be a receiver.
Yep, definitely. I was thinking the same thing. Glad we agree on that. Now, last few questions. I wanted to know just who are some of your favorite prospects in this draft that you just kind of wanted to spotlight?
Sure. It's not just that they play at Georgia, but it is Nolan Smith. It is Broderick Jones. I like Christopher Harris. I mean, there's something to be said for being a two-time national championship, right? Like that brings some gravitas. I'm a big fan of Cedric Tillman in this offense. I think he gives enough of not just the contested catch X, but he can do more than that, and I expect that. I like some of the smaller guys too. I'm not against Zay Flowers. I just have trouble. I think everyone thinks because Tyreek Hill broke the mold and Zay's about his size that can happen, and it's just not a one-to-one. There is no Tyreek Hill 2.
Right.
It's not coming. So I'm just guarding against that. I like Miles Murphy. I like Yaya Diaby. I think those guys are both athletic enough to do it. And I think Yaya gets the short end of the stick because he's more athletic than Miles is, despite a fast 40 time. I think there's plenty of defenders at the linebacker level that can do you some good, but it's not elite. So I think those are day 3 options that Brett Veach is going to have at his fingertips that he can just add more. And if we can get more coverage ability at the linebacker level, Drew Tranquil's here for a reason, and that's it. If you add that more and more and more, then you're helping your special teams and you're defending against where the league is going. And that is not just 11 personnel with 3 wide receivers. You're going to see spread elements coming here soon where there's 4 wideouts on the field and you have to defend space with a linebacker or else you're giving up the run so much that you're going to get crushed. So I like some of that too. In the end, I want to drift back towards power. And I love the fact that it's a solid guard class and the running backs are really interesting. I want to see the run game come back. So selfishly for me, I like the fact that you could have 2 Texas guys go and the backup in college might end up being a better pro player. We'll see.
Yeah, no, that's some great stuff. I mean, there's a lot to like in this year's draft class, especially at running back. Like you said, it's in the later rounds too. There's a lot of interesting guys. I know Dan, one of his guys was Tank Bigsby from Auburn. I really like him too. He was actually pretty good against Missouri this past year. That was a horrible game, by the way. I don't know if you saw the way that ended, but yeah, we'll move on though. So I'm sure you get asked about a lot of your favorite prospects a lot, but a question I have for you is, who are some of your prospects that are just stay away? A lot of Chiefs fans like this guy, but I don't.
You know, the guy that's been popping up lately and I've been getting a lot of questions about is Mozzie Smith. And there's just some off the field things that just scream knucklehead to me. Like he's a solid player, but I don't know if he's going to be available enough to make me comfortable. There's some injury history there as well. So like I would shy away from him if it were me in the room. And if Brett Veach is asking me in my opinion, I'm telling him no, just take him off the board. That's just me. I will say this too. I think there's a lot of artificial hype in the media this year. I think there are a lot of prospects that have been pushed way up compared to where the teams actually see them. So I think the Chiefs have some shots at some guys that right now we don't talk about, like Quentin Johnson, like Lucas Van Ness. I think he could fall within range of the Chiefs striking distance as well. I think there's a trade up in the Chiefs' future, and it could be kind of like the McDuffie trade was last year, where it's 8-10 spots, but it's not like all the way up into the top 10.
For sure. Yeah.
And so I think the bank. Yeah, exactly. So I think there's plenty of guys there that I'm lower on than the media is, but I think I'm closer to where the teams think.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting answer because Brett Veach did talk about potentially trading up. He did also talk about trading back. I don't think he'll trade back. He's not a guy that trades back a lot. He's an aggressive GM. We know that. When he wants to, he'll go up and get a guy. He did it multiple times last year. So that'll be interesting to see. I just questioned it a little bit just because the treasure chest of draft picks, I mean, it's still a lot, but it's not as valuable. They had more picks in the top 100 last year than they did this year. So it'll be interesting to see what they actually give up if they do move up, but looking forward to seeing what happens. Last question I had for you, and this is one I'm sure you'll be looking forward to answering because it's a little bit early to be talking about this, but I always remember from watching you that you would say this. You always said that there was a day with Patrick Mahomes' contract. We've seen all these quarterbacks lately kind of get paid, and each one is getting paid more than Mahomes. That's what we expected when Mahomes signed his deal. We always said it was a team-friendly deal, but you always said there was a day that Patrick Mahomes was going to come back to the table, and he's going to say, hey, I need to be kind of closer to the top 5. Brett Veach actually talked about this in his most recent press conference, that after the Burrow and Herbert deals, they would go back to Mahomes and work some things out and improve his contract. So how close do you think we are to that? And what would a contract adjustment look like for Patrick Mahomes?
You know, I think it's safe right now. I really targeted 26 as the year that they do that, the offseason of 26. Maybe the artificial inflation makes them push that up a year. It could be 25.
Sure.
But I do think it comes back to what's the average salary come out to? Give me 80% of that and keep it so that we can I get paid and we get cap space as a team. I do think Patrick keeps it team friendly in terms of being able to acquire other players. I don't think he's going to give away the bank. I don't think he's going to be like, oh, give me 10 mil and I'm good. When you know, Schmo is getting 54, you know, a 3rd round pick that plays his way. Brock Purdy might get paid more than him by the time he gets a contract extension. I don't know. We'll find out. But
well, I mean, the thing is, I mean, all of a sudden you look at the list and he's almost like the 10th highest paid, which is just crazy to think. And I feel like a good range to keep him in is kind of like that top 7 to 8. And there will be a day where he falls out of that range. And it's like, okay, he deserves a little bit more than this.
Yeah. And I think the good thing is, I think they have a plan. I do believe that Lee Steinberg and Chris have been involved in setting up with the expectation for Brett Veach so they can map it out. I think Patrick can play well up to 40, maybe even beyond. I know by the time we get there, we're going to be talking about, is it Mahomes or Brady? I do feel that's going to be the conversation. I think that might artificially push him a little farther. But I think there's still at least 2 big contract changes, whether it's extensions or rip-ups and restart, that get done for Patrick Mahomes' career.
Yeah, and for that to happen, for him to play that long, the Chiefs might have to go out and draft Broderick Jones to keep him upright for the next 4 to 5 years, like you suggested. Yeah, but no, I mean, that's all I got for you, Ryan. It was super fun having you on again. I always appreciate your insight. Again, you've been a huge inspiration to me since when I started my channel. It's fun watching you. It's fun seeing how much you've grown too, because I remember during your live streams, your Monday night Q&As, used to be like 200-300 people, and I'd be able to ask like 5 questions every night, and you'd answer every single one of them. Now I'm lucky to get a question in there.
Oh man, I tell you, I pipe up when I see you though, because it is getting tough these days. But the fun part for me is watching you too, because you're back at my old spot when I was at Addict. So good for you, and cheers to Matt Connor. Like, keep it rolling. I like what you're doing.
Yeah, no, Matt Connor's great. I saw you on Addict with him last week or whatever that was, talking draft and stuff. And that's actually when I decided to hit you up, because it's like, man, he's making his rounds. I think should probably hit him up before he gets too busy. But yeah, no, I appreciate it, man. But with all that being said, why don't you go ahead and tell the fans watching where they can find you if they haven't already?
Absolutely. The easiest way is just go to Ryan Tracy NFL on Twitter. I know Twitter's a mess right now, but it's still working. Yeah. So as long as it does, let's use it. But you can find me at rgrfootball.com. That goes to my YouTube channel. You can find me at NFL33.com. That's our Substack with Dan Harms and the rest of our staff, where we do like non-Chief stuff, like the whole league. And then Locked On Chiefs, you can find me every day. I'm sure everybody who's got the draft guide or the athletic metrics, that's at rogueapc.com. I don't know. I got a few things up my sleeve, but I'm losing track these days.
No, for sure. And I'll link all that stuff in the description so you guys can find it. Please go follow Ryan if you already aren't. Also consider becoming a member because he also has a member program on his channel as well. But I'm sure you forgot that because of all the stuff you're doing, that you forgot that you have members on your channel. But
here's the thing is YouTube relaxed their standards, right? So like now Dan can throw a little 4-letter word out every now and then. I have trained myself for years not to do that. So if you want the real stuff, if you want to talk like we're having a beer, well, I'm going to cuss a lot, and that's got to be on the members wall. So
yeah, if you guys love rants after a loss, go become a member on Ryan's channel. It's great. But no, that's all I got for you guys. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Some more Chiefs fans can find this. Make sure you check out my work on showmefootball.com and arrowheadaddict.com, and make sure you subscribe so you can follow me for our draft coverage as well as Ryan's. But we'll see you all in the next one. Go Chiefs.